Hello, welcome to the Let's Talk Kids Health Live Show, episode 74. I'm Dr. Nerissa Bauer, your host. I'm a behavioral pediatrician and CEO of Let's Talk Kids Health. As you know, the concept of this show is to share information about behavioral health, parenting, and family wellness. Each week, I bring you topics and guests to help me advance this mission so that we can all talk together. Now, let us know that you're here by commenting, asking questions, and liking this post at any time. And in a little bit, your questions will be asked of my guests. Now, the replay is immediately available after we broadcast. We're also going to be please making sure to share this episode with anyone you think who would benefit. And if you don't want to miss future episodes or maybe check out the past ones, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, NerissaBauerMD, follow my blog Facebook page, Let's Talk Kids Health, and join my free parenting discussion group. Now, today's topic is all about childhood trauma with special guest Dr. Candice Jones. Dr. Jones is an American Academy of Pediatrics spokesperson, a published author, and a board certified physician practicing as a general pediatrician in Orlando, Florida. She provides a standard of care that enriches the lives of thousands of kids and parents each year. Dr. Candice completed residency in pediatrics at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine in Baltimore, Maryland. She earned her medical doctorate at the Morehouse School of Medicine in Atlanta, Georgia. I am so honored to have her here as my guest tonight. Thank you so much, Dr. Jones, for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. Hello to your audience. Thanks for being here. And thank you, Dr. Nerissa, for having me. Glad to come on your show as you shared on my podcast.
Yes, yes. And we're going to talk all about your resources, your website, your podcast, also at the very end. So I'm so excited that you brought that up. And as you know, this has been, I feel like I open the show all the time talking about how the past several years has been really hard for everybody given the pandemic, recently with the school shootings. I mean, there's just constantly different things and events happening in our society that can be very traumatic. But it doesn't have to be that extreme to be considered trauma for kids. And so I am so glad to have you on the show because I know that you have a passion and a mission for helping the underserved and, helping fight disparities. And I just thought of you and having you here to discuss the whole gamut of childhood trauma. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me this evening.
Yes. Well, so I want to start off with just a general question because throughout this topic, whenever we talk about trauma, the word ACEs comes up. And because we know what that means, I just want to make sure that everybody here who's watching now, even if they might have seen other shows where we've talked about this, it's important to just define what ACEs are so that we get started on the same page.
Right. That's a great place to start. You're right. So ACEs are adverse childhood experiences, or childhood trauma is the also known as. And they are traumatic events that are perceived as traumatic events by a child that has negative impact or harms them in some way. And we know that these experiences happen from birth, from the time of birth, 0 to 17 years of age. And so throughout the lifespan of a young person all the way into adolescence. And they can be in 3 categories. And I say that loosely because we know now that ACEs can be a broad range of things, but the original ACE study talked about 3 categories of various types of trauma, like sexual trauma, abuse, or physical abuse, also in a category of neglect, and then also in family dysfunction. So within those broader categories, this is where we see those 10 original ACEs falling in those categories. A child being physically abused, sexually abused, not being well taken care of, and then within homes that have a lot of toxic that definition has broadened in the sense that things like you mentioned, the for children, and the school shooting and you're a traumatic children. So it can be climate type of cases. And so that term is broadening to be any type of traumatic event that is perceived by a child that could affect them in a negative way.
So, I love though that, you just sort of help define it in the broadest sense. But you said something right at the beginning that caught my attention. And if you don't mind just kind of talking a little bit more about that, is that you said it also is something that the child perceives.
Right. Right.
Right? Can can
Absolutely.
can you talk a little bit more about that? And how could, you as a general pediatrician come to find out that information from the child, from the family, when you're seeing a family in the clinic?
I believe that Bruce Perry had three E's of trauma, childhood trauma. And it was the event, it was the experience, and the effects, right? I think I got those three E's right. And
Say that again.
so I think is the event, how that person experiences that event, and the effect
Mhm,
that it causes on that person. So those three E's to break down that trauma, right?
mhm.
And so one child or one person may experience what we may think is a traumatic event, and it may not bother them so much. It may not have any negative outcomes so much. But another child may have something that we don't think is a big deal. Um, and it really does impact them. So there is something to be said about how people perceive what they go through
Yeah.
when we talk about trauma, childhood trauma.
hmm Yeah. And, so this is really a great kind of segue into, you just talked about how ACEs can impact the health of children. Can you give us some examples of what are those things that parents or physicians, providers should be on the lookout for?
Right. So, symptoms of trauma is what I'm looking for, right?
Mhm.
The one classic one, because there's so many, is children be acting out behaviorally or emotionally, right? Getting into fights at school, being irritable or angry, being withdrawn or behaving withdrawn. Children who come to us as pediatricians, and the parent or the teachers think the child has ADHD. And so, some of those things we do to rule that out. Are you sleeping well? Certainly, sleep can cause behavioral problems and affect the way a child learns or how they behave at school. Do you have sleep apnea? Is there any major changes in the home? Has there been loss? Has there been trauma? So sometimes pediatricians aren't trying to get in your business, but it's truly to understand the environment that the child is in. Has something happened that has called a ripple effect on this child, and that's why their behavior is that way? Because children often communicate through their behaviors.
Mhm.
They don't have that higher level of cognition and communications. And some adults don't either, to say, I'm doing this because this happened, right?
Mhm.
So their behavior speaks volumes to what could be going on with them. And so we have to look at their behavior and dissect that and ask those questions, and not so much to judge and point fingers, but to say this may be something, that move, that divorce, the loss of a grandparent. I've seen that a lot during the pandemic, a loss of key loved ones. We know a lot of children have become orphaned.
Mhm.
And so this is why a lot of children are struggling in their mental health, because of all the things that have gone on the past couple of years. And this is childhood trauma, or ACEs.
Yes. Thank you for that. And I love how you said, it's all about the environment, the context, and there's no judgment or shame. For as a pediatrician, you have the honor of sort of following that family over time and being able to dig a little bit deeper with
Mhm.
these families so that they feel like they can trust you with that information. But it's really important. I just want us to just reiterate that with people viewing or listening to this on replay later, that it's so important that, even if your physician does not bring this up, it's not that they don't care, but you have every right to mention, like, I don't know if this is something, but it's something that I've noticed,
Mhm.
right? Because you'd rather have them bring up something about their child's behavior, about any concern, so you can talk about it.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. None is off limits, in my opinion, when it comes to talking to your pediatrician. We're not just here to give you antibiotics for ear infection or treatment for headaches or something physical. We absolutely care about your child's mental health, emotional, behavioral health, how they're doing in school, how they're getting along with peers, every aspect of their life we care about, and we want to know about it so that we can help in any way that we can.
Now, is there anything that, as parents, as adults, is there anything that we can do to prevent ACEs from even affecting kids in the first place?
In all honestly, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but it's impossible to go through life and not experience some trauma,
Hmm.
kids included, right?
Yes.
But we can do our best as parents because that's what we do. We're mama bears, our moms and dads, and we try to protect our kids. And sometimes we may be doing some things, or we have, we may have an environment going on that may be harming our kids. And so it is important to prevent ACEs as best we can, any type of trauma. So some of the things that we can do is, simply like having a trusted pediatrician, right? And taking your child into care and having teachers that you're connected to, and having your children in a lot of pro-social, safe environments in the community, whether it's through sports or arts, a church community, or however you worship. That type of ecosystem of support we know is powerful in preventing ACEs. It provides a safe, stable, nurturing environment, and also a source of multiple nurturing relationships within your home and out in the community. If there's something going on at home that may be a source of ACEs, but you have given this gift of this system of support to your child, they likely will be able to overcome what's going on. They will have the support to help them get through that. And so that's one thing. Other things we can do is, as parents, as much as we can, provide positive childhood experiences. So we're talking about adverse childhood experiences. We can provide positive childhood experiences to kind of tip that scale to
Mm.
the other side. And that doesn't mean buying your child everything and giving them what they want, because you have to be a parent and you have to discipline, and there has to be rules and structure and all of those things to keep our kids safe and help them to become productive adults one day. But it's all about that, what we call ordinary magic, building their resilience, spending quality time, reading together, having affection and love and mutual respect for one another. Just having a healthy relationship with your child provides those positive childhood experiences, letting them know that you are there and you have their back. So
Mhm.
those are some things that you can do. But also, as parents, we need to have more knowledge about positive parenting, for instance. If you're an expectant mother or plan to have kids, it's so good to go ahead and learn about the best ways to parent kids, how important bonding and attachment is early on, the best ways to support healthy development in children. There's so much we can learn because kids don't come with instruction manuals, right?
No, they don't.
So all of that stuff are just some options as ways we can prevent ACEs and buffer our kids when bad times do come.
Mhm. Yeah. I'm just thinking out loud about, maybe the parent who's watching or listening to this and they're thinking, gosh, I don't have family that live close by. They're trying to think about, who could they return to. I love that you threw out some ideas there, thinking about the child's school, your places of worship. Any other ideas for the parent who's just kind of thinking, gosh, do I have that many people who I feel like I could really talk to
Right.
about
Right.
this?
Right. And I missed family. That's a huge one, right? Trusted
Yes.
family members, trusted friends. That's one thing that we definitely have to do as parents is find our three, as the
Yes.
American Academy of Pediatrics says. So don't give up on that thinking you have no one. Find your three. Start with your pediatrician.
Yeah, your
Certainly, that
pediatrician
could
can
be
be,
a
yeah.
go-to
Mhm.
person to
Mhm.
talk to and help you build up those resources and support systems. Look around your community. May be mentor groups. Check with that house of worship. They may have youth groups, your local YMCA or Boys and Girls Club, any sports or arts type organizations in your community. There are so many resources in your community. You just have to ask for help. Don't be afraid to. You need that support. And if you already have it in place and something tough comes, it makes it all the more easier to overcome it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And you talked about how, trauma can run the gamut from something very mundane or quote minor to us as parents, but to kids it can, it's their
Mhm.
perception, right? To really the big things that affect and cuts across all of us. Um, so what about, like, if trauma has already occurred, does this mean that it's too late, it's too bad, so sorry? I mean, is how should parents kind of think about this and work with their pediatrician, should something like divorce or a death happen?
Right. That's a great question. And no, all is not lost because we know this happens. We all have good and bad times, and you're not alone. And so divorces happen, deaths happen, COVID happened,
Yes.
and all the domino effect from all of that. And so we always have to pick up, the pieces and start again and overcome this stuff. And so it's not all lost. But when we think about children, their brains are rapidly developing and they're sensitive and vulnerable to these traumas. And so, as parents, if we recognize something is happening with something has happened that's traumatic, we see something maybe going on with our kids that's not their normal, usual self. We've tried to do all we can to buffer them and cushion them through this bad time, but it's off. Definitely see your pediatrician. They may need to, if there's those symptoms of trauma we talked about, they may need to want to refer or give you some resources to help provide more buffering to your child, to help your child build more resilience. It may be a trauma focused type of therapy. It may be just some family counseling. It may be a mentoring program. It could be various forms of support to help your child overcome those tough times. And that would be based on what your child may be exhibiting. For instance, if your child is dealing with depression out of all that's gone on through the pandemic, you know, it may be that your child may need some therapy, maybe even medication temporarily. There's so many things that may be needed just to get them back on the right track. And so sometimes that's very important. And we have, pediatricians like you that kind of help with these situations, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes someone has to come in the home and maybe work with the family and put some things in place to kind of smooth out the edges. But there's always help, and all hope is not lost. And we want to do everything we can to build up your child's resilience to kind of overcome that adversity that has occurred. And definitely don't forget about your positive childhood experiences that you're going to keep pouring into them.
Mhm.
Don't forget about, as soon as you can, providing a safe, stable, nurturing environment, and those relationships that need to be in place. All of that should always be there to help to heal from trauma, to help to overcome trauma, and then any additional sprinkled on it based on what has happened. But the
Mhm.
healing and the building of resilience is so important, to overcome adversity when it comes.
Mhm. I mean, one of the things that I'm thinking about as we're talking about this, I mean, it really strikes me that, you said find your three, the campaign that the American Academy of Pediatrics has to help really empower families to sort of look for those support people. But time and again, what you're saying is, and kind of, kind of inherent in this is you can't do it by yourself, right?
Right.
I'm thinking about some of those single moms who are trying to do it all, working maybe double, jobs and feeling the guilt. Like I
Mhm.
I can't I can't be here and there and feeling like how can I provide this safe, stable, nurturing relationship when I have to like leave before my child gets up, but then I have to rely on somebody to get them out the door and then I, have limited time. But I think what you're
Right.
saying is that that's exactly why we all need that support.
That's right. We all need help. There is
Yeah.
nothing wrong with it. There is nothing wrong asking for it. We all have needed help and will need help. And so we have to build I mean, we're just better together when we're helping each
Yes.
other out, right? You can't do it alone. And I think that's a perfect point for us to mention to that mom, right?
Mhm.
Or dad who's in that situation, which is all too often, is letting your child be with these other safe, stable people, well-regulated people to help you so you can have time to take care of yourself as well. Because if all of that's going on, you may be having some of your own mental health struggles or physical health struggles or emotional struggles because of all that's gone on. And so you may need to take the time to see your own therapist or exercise or get some sleep or whatever it see your doctor,
Mhm.
to take care of yourself. That's so important, in order to take care of your kids.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned some of those practical strategies for parents because, we're
Mhm.
both pediatricians taking care of kids, but we do have to, and we oftentimes talk about caregiver wellness
Mhm.
strategies for their own mental health because it does impact how that child is functioning at home and school as well.
Yeah, that's what kids need. A
Mhm.
well-regulated adult,
Yes.
right? That's what kids need. And so if we're struggling as a parent, we've got to work on that probably first and foremost to give them
Mhm.
what they need.
Mhm. I hope you don't mind me asking this just because
Mhm.
we're sort of on this topic. I've many people might have heard like this whole thing that ACEs can be too generational. Can you talk a little bit more to that? Like, are you seeing that? How do we kind of talk with that, or how do you talk about that with your families?
Right. I absolutely tell parents that ACEs are so impactful
Hmm.
that they absolutely can not only create behavior, emotional, physical problems. We know that ACEs are correlated, to, many of the leading causes of death: heart disease, cancer,
Hmm.
not just emotional, mental, behavioral problems, but also physical health problems. And we know well, we think we know, we don't know fully, but the mechanism of that is through our epigenetics. And I know
Hmm.
that's a big word, but we know that the stress of trauma, if we don't heal it, if we don't buffer it in children, it can become toxic stress. And toxic stress leads to elevations of our stress hormones, our fight or flight hormones in our body. And that does damage on our body. Even as adults, chronic stress kills our body, right? The body keeps the score.
Yes.
Someone said, I'm forgetting his name. It's a beautiful book about that.
Yes.
But as children's bodies and brains and their systems are rapidly developing, this toxic stress really does a number on their bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can create maladaptation, it can create dysfunction, and can even alter the way our DNA works, right? It's read and transcribed. And that's where epigenetics come in. And so once those alterations are created, that's kind of coded in there in your body. And as you have children and your children and your children, it can be those maladaptive changes, those dysfunctional changes at the level of the DNA can be passed on through
Mm-hmm.
generations.
Yeah.
Now, that's biological,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
But there are also social and psychological effects of that, because hey, if I had such trauma that was not buffered, and my end result, my impact was substance abuse and mental illness and all of these things because of the profound trauma I had in my life, then what type of environment am I going to create for my kids? And so yes, that perpetuates too.
Mm-hmm.
So it happens on a bio, psycho, social, a whole big umbrella, because of all the effects of the environment that that person may create for their kids because of what they've gone through that they haven't dealt with. But also, we know it is passed on through generations as well at the level of our DNA.
Mm-hmm.
So this is huge. I hope I didn't get too technical, but this has huge healthcare cost, right? When we talk about our labor force, our workforce, our society as a whole, if we could prevent this and have more individuals who have healed from adversity and can overcome adversity versus ones who didn't get that help because we weren't aware of all of this in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine how much better society can be, how much disease can prevent,
Mm-hmm.
and how much cost we can,
Save. Yeah.
get right, save. And so it's very important.
Yeah. And again, I love that throughout this conversation, we've been talking about buffering, building that resilience muscle, finding the supports, because, your genes doesn't necessarily have to dictate destiny, and we can
Yeah,
all change and support each other.
yeah, I think I love where the aces are not your destiny.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've said that even though ACEs have occurred, you can overcome them. The brain and the body is very, what we call, the brain is neuroplastic, right? And we can alter and we can flip the script and go back
Yep.
to a better place. We can heal and we can build resilience and we can get back to a better place. So yes, definitely all hope is not lost.
Yes. Dr. Jones, thank you so much for talking about this topic. It's so important. I do want to tell those who are watching or listening to make sure that, you follow Dr. Jones on Instagram. I'm putting up her Instagram handle here. Please tell us a little bit about your podcast and how that started, because I think you're like almost at episode 100. You've been doing it
You
for a
know,
while.
as long as I've been doing it, I should have more episodes. But life, kids,
Yes.
practice. I'm one of those that can't get out a weekly podcast like you're doing. You're amazing. So I'm monthly, right? That's unheard of, but that's what I can do. And so I've been doing it since 2016.
Uh-huh.
I'm kidding around with Dr. Candice, and this is not joking around. It's just KID. This is all about kids and me talking to wonderful pediatric experts about things that are relevant to children's health and parenting and all these wonderful things. And so no topic is off limit, and as much as is pertinent in our times. So I love doing it. And please, by all means, take a listen and subscribe, rate, and review, right? That's what we're
Yep.
supposed to be saying.
Yes, yes. And you could see the name of the podcast there on the ticker down below. So please make sure to find her podcast, subscribe, rate, and review so that other people can find the podcast and get that essential information. I love it because, as you mentioned at the beginning, I was a guest on your podcast. It was very, I mean, you're just very conversational. You break down these important topics, just like tonight when you talked about ACEs and the epigenetics and all of these different things that can be really scary or overwhelming for parents. But what I love about how you approach it, it's just, very practical, down to earth. You can really get to the essence of it so that parents can understand. So if you want more of this, please make sure to go listen to her podcast.
Thank you so much.
Yes, of course. And I just wanted to remind you all that if you have any topics or guests that you'd like to suggest, please reach out to me by email at drnerissa@letstalkkidshealth.org. Follow me on my social media platforms, and you can also message me there. I do want to, just as one housekeeping thing, is that if don't forget to join our current book club, Breaking Free of Child Anxiety and OCD by Dr. Eli Leibovitz. We're going to be reading this over the next 3 months, and Dr. Leibovitz is going to be coming on to do a virtual author book club at the end of August. The date will be announced here shortly once we get that confirmed. But again, please join in at any time. And as you know, if you're a member of the parenting discussion group, that's where all the prompts are going to be, just to help us keep reading together and growing together. And then just to let you know, next week, my guest will be Kelly Biltz, who will be talking with me about teens with ADHD. As you know, this is a topic that I talk about a lot, but I'm really excited to have Kelly join me. Teens are her jam. So please don't miss that one. If you have any questions, comments, you'll want to tune in live. All right. Well, I just wanted to thank you once again, Dr. Jones, for your time tonight. I really appreciate it. It's been fun reconnecting with you. Again, please make sure to go find her and follow her on social media. And, if you have any ongoing questions, comments after you watch this, make sure you comment below, put #replay. That way, myself and my team will be looking for those comments later. So if there wasn't a question that we answered live, that we can go back and make sure we've got your back. So that way we can get those questions answered. All right. Anything else that you want to add, Dr. Jones, before we say goodnight?
Yeah, I think one big thing is, resources, as far as you can go to cdc.org under ACEs or adverse childhood experiences to learn more, to go more in depth into some of the topics we talked about tonight. Some wonderful book, The Deepest Well by Dr. Nadine Burke Harris. Some of the things we said, as far as The Body Keeps the Score, a wonderful book. Oprah and Bruce Perry has a wonderful book. There's so many great resources about ACEs that can fill in those gaps for you. So, and even in my book, High Five Discipline, Positive Parenting for Happy, Healthy, Well-Behaved Kids, I have a whole chapter about that intersection of ACEs and parenting and discipline.
Yes.
So I think that's a good viewpoint as well.
Of course, your book, how could we not mention that?
I
Yes.
just thought of it myself.
Yeah, no, those are great resources. So I'll make sure that we'll put all those resources in the show notes. So that way, again, as you're watching this episode, listening to it again on replay, you'll have it right at your fingertips and can access those if you want to learn more. And I do hope all of you listening are so intrigued to do that, because as we said, we can't do this work alone. We need to lift each other up, and every little bit counts. So thanks so much for spreading this message, Dr. Jones. It was such a pleasure to chat with you tonight.
This was wonderful. And healthychildren.org too. We better not
Yes.
forget to say that.
Yes.
but this was wonderful. And I'm so glad to have come on. Such an important topic. So I'm glad we did this both ways.
Yes, I am too. I am too. Well, thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.